Hello, I'm Dick Shattuck. Welcome to Unto Others, a program about ordinary people doing extraordinary things for others. In our time together, we meet individuals who have learned to put into practice what has become known as the Golden Rule, to do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Our special guest today is Catherine Smit. Welcome, Catherine. We're glad to have you on our program.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Catherine, as I see about you, you are a police officer in the Fort Worth area in White Settlement. You're a DARE officer. You've written a book, Tragedy to Triumph. You're a survivor of abuse. You speak at women's ministries and schools and churches, and you're just an extraordinary lady. We're glad you're here today.
Thank you. I wouldn't say I'm an extraordinary lady.
Well, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. So I'd like to begin with your career as a police officer. You know, we always have a kind of an image of police officers, and you don't fit that image necessarily. So tell me about your career as a police officer. Why did you decide to be a police officer?
I always had this image of a police officer doing something fun and exciting and things like that. And that seemed, pretty much something that was appealing, but really, because of my past and some of the real hard issues that I had dealt with, I thought, if I was a police officer, I could really help people. And no one could get anything past me because I've done it all. I thought I would really be, good at being a police officer, and it just seemed like the excitement and everything just seemed like something I would really be interested in doing. But as I got older, the real reason why I wanted to become a police officer is because I felt like the badge would get me in places that a regular, ordinary civilian may not be able to get, and be able to be a witness and to be able to serve people.
Well, how did you get started?
I actually went on a civilian ride program where just regular civilians go and ask the police department
Riding with another
ride with a police
officer.
officer.
Okay.
Yeah, and I got to ride with a female officer in Grand Prairie, and it was about 6 hours of her shift, and I was just thrilled. I mean, we hardly answered any calls, but it was just so cool being in the police car, any traffic stop or any even loud noise caller. Oh, this is so exciting. I was just thrilled to death to be in the police car. And man, I was just hooked. Oh, this was great. But I couldn't ride again for 6 more months. And 6 more months had passed, and so I asked my friend that went to church with me, a male officer, hey, can you get me another opportunity to ride again? He says, yeah, your 6 months is up. Yeah, I'll do that. So he got me another opportunity to ride with a female officer again. And it was just great. And there were a couple of really exciting calls that we went on, and she let me go with him, and it happened to be a domestic disturbance. And I just saw the opportunities. I wanted to speak up right then and there and say something because I knew exactly what to say. And so I just really kept thinking about this. Lord, this would be such a neat thing to be a police officer. And at the time, my husband and I, at that time I was married to my ex-husband, and we had our own business. And I didn't need to work for extra money because our business, sustained us, and it kept us in a living and everything. But I just had this desire to somehow become a police officer in spite of the thing that we had our own business going.
And how many years ago was that?
15 years ago.
So you've been a police officer for 15 years?
Yes, absolutely.
And how long did you have to do this volunteer before you finally got on the payroll, so to speak?
I was a reserve with Grand Prairie for 2.5 years, and I didn't need a job at the time. So we worked the business, and then I would work Friday nights, because Friday nights was the nights that you really got the best training. So I'd go on patrol on Friday nights with them, and I would work one shift during a day shift because there was a certain field training officer who was willing to continue ongoing training for us, because the reserves got just a little bit of training, not if you were a full-time police officer. They had a full 17 weeks, but I just got a little bit. And so I knew I needed more, and I wanted to refine this and not just do it every now and then, because then I didn't feel like I would be good enough. I wouldn't have the skills honed and sharpened to really feel like I could
got on full
trust
time.
it. Got full-time.
And what kind of positions have you held since you've been on full-time?
I went just strictly as a patrol officer for a couple of years. I have done a lot of community relations things, like I've done the Santa Cop program and visitation for the elderly, and just different things like that, because I wanted to do things to benefit the community.
Well, it's nice to hear that, because when I heard you kind of consider your being a police officer a ministry. And most of us don't think of police officers as a ministry, getting your ticket and so on, and how does that minister? But I see you do other things.
Well, the ticket can minister to you if I'm saving your life.
Most of it I've got, I haven't thought that's necessarily what happened. But anyway, so what these you do a lot of other things besides write tickets. That's where I'm getting at?
Some is a lot of counseling. Sometimes we go on domestic calls, and there are people in extreme need of information on how they can either protect themselves or how they can help themselves, especially if the man is battering the woman. He needs to hear from somebody some kind of answers. The woman needs certain counseling for how to deal with her own safety, but also, you know, whether the marriage is going to stay together or not, how to protect herself, how to protect her children, and what to look for. And, you know, the Lord's really given me some insight into that because of coming out of a life of those different types of situations.
Okay, well, now one of the things you've got a car out here, and we're going to have some pictures on the screen of your car. You're a DARE officer.
Yes.
Now, first I want to know, what exactly is a DARE officer?
Well, DARE stands for Drug Abuse Resistance Education.
Drug Abuse Resistant Education, okay.
And so we go into the classrooms of public schools and we educate students. We teach them what drugs do to the body. We teach them about risk-taking and decision-making and consequences and life skills. Basically, we're preparing them in the elementary level so that they can be prepared for all the things that they're going to encounter as junior high students and high school students. They're going to have offers to smoke and offers to drink.
Okay.
They're going to have offers to smoke marijuana, to maybe try some harder drugs. They're going to also be asked by guys or different ones, other types of situations, sexual situations, party situations, drinking and driving situations, and we educate them in advance and prepare them for those types of decisions that they're going to be facing later on in life. And we're trying to equip them. And it's really been told that when you teach a child all the facts and you totally equip them, they're much better at making very rational decisions, good, solid decisions, than if they've never heard this before. So we're preparing them, and we actually do role plays in the classroom so that they have the opportunity to tell a person no and get comfortable with the idea just in a role play setting, so that when the real thing happens, then they're able to say, hey, I remember this, and it'll just come more naturally to them.
Yeah. Now, we're going to have to take a break here in just a few minutes, but I want to talk a little bit about the violence that, you know, a lot of violence in communities now, you know, and aren't you a little fearful of the violence and so on in communities when, you know, being a lady like you are and so on?
If I ever had to rely on myself, yes, I would be. But one of the things, my children at first were afraid, and I just had to tell them, if God has the beginning and the end, He knows when our time is. And if it's my time to go, I'm going to go if I'm sitting at home in my rocking chair. And if it's not my time to go, I'm not going to go.
Okay, we're going to have to break now, and we're going to be right back. Hang in there with us, and we'll continue this with Catherine Smit. Welcome back to On to Others with our special guest, Catherine Smit. She's been telling us about her career as a police officer and as a DARE officer, and we want to talk more about that. Now, the DARE, we said, is drug awareness,
drug abuse,
drug abuse resistance education. I've got that down now. And so, in your working as a DARE officer, what age groups are you talking about that you work with in schools? That's where you go mainly. Schools, is that right, or where?
The DARE program is presented. Primarily focuses on 5th or 6th grade, whichever is the exit elementary year, leading into middle school or junior high. But there is a program for junior high students and one for senior high students. I'm actually certified in all 3 levels, but when I get to choose the level that I really want to deal with, I always choose the junior high students. I just have this special knack for that particular age group and older. I'm not particularly great. They have a K2 and 4 visitation program too, but that's really not my ministry. My ministry is teens, especially at the age where they're deciding who they want to be in life. Okay. And the curriculum that DARE teaches, we teach character in junior high. And in the character training, I'm trying to get them to think way ahead on who they want to be as an adult and who they want others to see them as. And I'm trying to make them think a little bit further than right now, which is where junior high children usually look at, just the right here and the right now. And so I'm trying to get them to focus on where they want to go in life and how they want people to perceive them. And I want them to learn the character now, the ways that they handle themselves now is who they're going to become.
Good.
And
so now you're a Christian, so
Yes.
and do you get a chance to pray with these young people?
I get a chance actually a lot in the public school setting to not just mention God, but to pray with students. And
Well, let me just ask you how you do that. Now, you know that in public school, or praying in public school is a big issue. Now, how do you do that? How do you?
when I'm in the class, especially in the junior high, I actually get the teachers to give me an extra day of class time. And I give my testimony about the things that I've been through in my past, because I think it's really important for a student to understand that there's more to me than just a uniform, just a cop. I want them to know me as a person, because I want them to know that I can identify with them where they're at. Mm-hmm. And if they see someone that's just this tough, hardcore exterior shell, they'll never come and trust me to possibly open up to some of their real burdens or their real pains that they're going through. So in the class, I give the testimony about all the past that I had and the abuse that I went through, and the stupid mistakes I made as a teenager. I mean, I made plenty of them, got kicked out of schools and things like that. And when they hear Officer Smit was kicked out of a school and that I was a runaway and stuff like that, and they're like, really? That helps them to say, wow, she understands where I am, especially when I talk about abuse and being accused of doing things I didn't do and all that. Then they know that I can identify with the hurts and pains that they've gone through. And after that testimony, they also find out that I sing. I'm able to sing a Christian song in the class. And the way I get this, when they ask me questions, I have to say, well, if you really want that answer, I have to ask the rest of the class, do you mind if I give this answer if I mention anything about God? And as long as I get that cleared with the rest of the class, then that's my open door to be able to say whatever I need to say. And I never have had a situation where the kids go, I would be offended. And I know if something did happen where it was just one or two that ever said that they were, I would ask the teacher, is it okay, since the rest of the class wants to hear it, can they step outside just long enough for me to answer that question? And then I would still be able to answer for the rest of the class. So I've been able to sing a song at the end of my testimony. If they ask me to, I'll sing a song, One Thing I Know. And that song is about, someone who's gone through a lot of hardships and trials, and it kind of really brings the message home to them that Jesus is there for them, and that's where you go with all of your problems. And these kids really get so bonded to me that they'll come to my office and they'll ask for counseling. And it's probably the main call that I have is kids wanting counseling, or teachers wanting me to counsel the kids, or parents wanting me to counsel with their kids. And I do an awful lot of counseling, and I always ask the child if they would be offended or not if I mention something about God, and they say, oh, that's all right, it doesn't bother me. And as long as they say that, then there's my open door, and I'm able to give them godly counsel, which is really the only thing I have to offer. The worldly counsel isn't it's worthless.
Yeah. But they don't know that. You have to find a way to do that. And I think, sometimes we are too afraid, to mention God in a public setting and so on. And I like the way you found a way to do that, a way to get in and get the kids' permission to do that. You're not forcing anything on them. You get their permission to do that. So that's great. And
these kids, I offer to pray with them at the close of counseling. Oh, they love it. They're so grateful. They hug me. They know that Officer Smit's where you can come if you want a free Bible in the school.
Really? I tell you get Bibles get Bibles away in school?
I give them away. They have a student-led prayer group on the campus, and so I just go to those leaders of the prayer group and say, by the way, if you ever have a young person, a student that needs a free Bible, come ask me, and I have free Bibles in my office. Just come get them from me.
That's great.
So, and there's students, sometimes while I'm counseling with them, I ask them if they've ever read the Bible. And, no, I've never read one. Do you have one? No. And so, will you mind if I give you one? And I'll sit and I'll write in the front of the Bible to them, and I'll write a real special message to them.
Wow.
And then I will teach them the right way to read the Bible. You start at the beginning. Of course, I kind of take them through all the begats and stuff of the first couple of chapters of Matthew. I start them, I try and get them in the New Testament, and I always encourage them to read a little bit of Proverbs every day, because that's where a real source of wisdom comes from. And I teach them how to read a Bible like you're reading a letter. It's somebody's writing a letter to someone, and you don't start in the middle of the letter.
Wow.
And you don't just take a couple of verses out and just read that. You read the whole letter from start to finish. And
What
tell
an
them this is
opportunity
their
that
wisdom.
this is amazing. You know, the
Yeah.
opportunity that you have to come into the public school setting and do this. I think it's just great.
Yeah, and the kids, some of them come back and say, "Hey, Officer Smit, I've been reading that Bible." And, oh, that's just so encouraging to know
Really.
that few minutes that I had with them, that open door, that, you know, that's a seed planted.
Yeah.
And I don't have to see the outcome. I know that God's going to take care of watering it and bringing it forth and springing it into a fruit-bearing
Yeah.
tree someday.
Well, that's what you just in God's hands. I mean,
That's
it's, you know,
right.
the Holy Spirit's work. You just open the door and let Him, you know, continue doing what He wants to do with each one of these kids.
That's right.
Well, I think that's just a super opportunity that you have in talking to these kids. Now, you should do a lot of public speaking outside of schools as well, I understand, you know,
Yeah.
and so on. So,
I'm invited
go?
to be a public speaker in actually many formats. I love the secular. I've actually gotten my Christian message with the Child Advocacy Center. It's one police officer that I met at a training school gave my book to them, and they're the ones who deal with children who
Okay.
are victimized and stuff like that. And
let's
they
continue.
had me.
We're going to take a break again. Let's continue this when we come back. And
Okay.
continue just where we're leaving off here, and then I want to get into other ministries and so on. So hang in with us, and we'll be right back as we continue this session of Unto Others. Welcome back to Unto Others. Our special guest is Catherine Smit. Welcome again. And she is a police officer in the Fort Worth area and also a DARE officer. And we were talking just before the break about you going and making public speaking engagements at other places besides just your public schools.
Right.
What topics do you speak on, and what do you do in those occasions?
I actually do a lot of topics. I speak on actually the work stuff. I am invited to church groups and youth groups to speak on the subjects that I speak on in DARE. I speak on drug awareness and the gang awareness topics. And I'm also have this way that I really felt like the Lord's helped me to come up with this tricky title called The ABCs of Sex and Dating, because I see the need for young people to understand their responsibilities and the beautiful way that God has a plan for marriage and how not to defile themselves before that. And
Mess it up,
yeah, it's just a real need out there, and I have a way of trying to lightheartedly talk to young people where they really listen. I also do the book subject on overcoming abuse, because I was a victim of abuse, physical and sexual abuse, as well as spousal abuse in my first marriage. And so I speak to groups on that subject, or I can also...
By the way, excuse me, we may say right here, there's not time to talk about all this in her life, you know, in this particular show. So she's going to come back, and our next show we'll continue this and talk more about your personal life. Go ahead.
Right. There's also people who just overcome a lot of suffering in their life. I mean, it doesn't have to be sexual abuse, physical abuse, or something like that. It can actually be any kind of suffering. I do topics on that. I am in the secular market for speaking on the type of work that I do to like the Child Advocacy Center and places like that. And I speak on public education versus Christian school education, because I'm on the school board at our church school.
Yeah.
And so I just do all kinds of different topics like
Well,
that.
now, getting back to your talking to the kids and so on, and the DARE deal we're talking about, how does the police department, does that they give you their blessing and talking about this Christianity and so on, God and the so on, when you go to the schools and public schools and talk?
They just...
Well, you said you can give out Bibles. What does the police department think about you giving out Bibles? Is that all right?
Well, my boss is a Christian,
Oh, that helps.
so that helps a lot, and they're really very much behind anything that I can do in supporting promoting Christ in the schools, because they realize that's really the answer for the kids' problems also. And the DARE entity isn't upset as long as my classwork is according to their curriculum, and I stay on curriculum in that, but they allow us to add to, with personal life experience and things like that, anything that is not a derogatory thing to DARE. And of course, leading a Christian life and wholesomeness and all that, there's nothing wrong with that. I just cannot be pushy, and I never push.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I wait for the kids to ask me, and I try to actually live the life as an example before them where they know I'm a godly person by how I conduct
That's really
myself.
what the Bible says. Be ready to give an answer to those that ask us these questions. That's the best way to share our faith, really, rather than pushing it. And so
Yeah, if
on.
you try and cram it down their throat, the kids certainly will resist that.
Right. Well, tell me, what kind of ministries are you involved in besides you have your police officer and your DARE officer? What other ministries are you involved in?
That's my primary ministry.
Okay.
I get this really free paycheck for doing
Free
the
paycheck.
job that I love. I mean, you just have no
Yeah.
idea. I go to work and I never feel like I'm at work. It's so
Well,
exciting.
I guess not. You drive around in a Mustang DARE car that's got boogie lights under it. And well, that'll be on the screen. We'll show you this car. You can see it too. But it's amazing.
It's not just the car, though. Actually, the
Yeah, right.
counseling of the young people, the interaction. I mean, I feel I come alive when I'm around young people. I know that's my ministry because of how much I come alive when I'm interacting with them. And then my other ministries are the public speaking engagements that I do. I'm involved at my church. I'm the praise and worship leader 1 week out of the month, and I'm also the social director. And anyone who's ever been to any of the socials that I've ever done, they know that they have no idea what they're in store for, because I am one of the biggest pranksters you'll ever meet. And we have an
You're just
awful
not
lot
a
of
typical
fun.
cop. You know
No.
what?
I've had
You-
men shave their legs for me and
Right.
thank me
Is that
for
right?
it.
Is
Yes,
that right?
grown men your age have shaved their legs and thanked me for such a great time. So that's in our socials that
I
we
think
have
you
at
ought,
the church.
you ought to teach a course in the police officers and how to change the image.
Well,
The guys that stop me out here on the highway, they're not like you.
and there is a certain business and a certain rapport that we have to have, because they have to know, the public has to know we mean business, and
Right.
that we can take on anything, we can handle anything that's brought our way.
Right.
But one of the things that I feel God's always led me in is, number one, always be a lady. Always be, let me say this back, I said that backwards. Number one, always be a godly person.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, women, especially in the police force, have lost their femininity. And they feel like they have to put on this macho image,
Yeah.
and I can handle this,
Yeah.
and
Like
that's
a jailer.
baloney, because I'm a woman.
Yeah.
There is no way I can take on a man. No way. A man can clobber me, and if I didn't have all my gear on, but thank goodness I have all these fun toys and everything. And if someone tries to take me on, I can take care of business if I need to. But the Lord has shown me the best tool that I have is being respectful to people and giving them dignity, even though they really mess up. I mean, I don't care if I'm arresting someone as a pedophile, and I've had to. And that's one of the hardest cases in the world, is to deal with someone who has assaulted a child.
Wow.
But I can still give them some kind of a dignity.
Try to
And I
control
can
yourself on
still
those.
point them
Yeah.
to Christ, even in that kind of
Yeah.
a setting. And I believe that's how God's called me, and He's enabled me to be a communicator. And my communication is how I earn people's respect. I don't have to show the force.
Right.
And how I carry myself. I carry myself kind of business.
Yeah.
I'm not the same out on the street.
Right.
Some people think, they've called me certain names. Oh, I thought you're really, this, but you're really nice. I said, when they get to know me, they get to see that side.
Well, tell me, how can people or organizations get a hold of you, contact you to come and speak at their function or their school or whatever? I know people are going to want to do this after hearing that.
And they're more than welcome to call if they want me to speak. They just call my home number, 817.
All right. We will have this on the screen. Put it
Yes.
on the screen. And your email number?
Right. They
you
can call me at 817-423-0000 and set up
Okay.
an appointment, or email me.
Okay. Appreciate you being with us. And like we
Thank
couldn't
you.
finish today, and so we are going to finish this show next time and get better acquainted with Catherine Smit. Thanks for being with us. Be with us next time. Hello, I'm Dick Shattuck. Welcome to Unto Others, a program about ordinary people doing extraordinary things for others. In our time together, we meet individuals that have learned to put into practice what has become known as the Golden Rule, to do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Today, our special guest is Catherine Smit. Catherine, welcome to Unto Others again.
Thank you.
We had you on our last program, and you were a police officer that time. Now you're in your city clothes. So we're nice to see you as a lady. You were a lady before, but you're a very pretty lady now.
Thank
We're
you.
glad that you're here on our program. And this time, well, let me introduce you a little bit better. Here's some of your background. She's a police officer from the Fort Worth area. She's also a DARE officer. She's written a book, Tragedy to Triumph, her own autobiography. We'll talk about that in a minute. She's a survivor of abuse and a speaker at women's ministries and schools and churches on self-defense and so on. So you're an extraordinary lady. We're just glad to have you here again. We had a wonderful time with you last time as a police officer in your DARE car and all this sort of thing, and how exciting that your work is, and more than exciting, how the Lord blesses your work and helping you to be able to witness for Him and share Him with young people that are really need
Hurting.
Him,
That's
need Him
right.
and hurting, need Him in a special way. So first I want to ask you about what caused you to write your autobiography?
Because, the title of it's Tragedy to Triumph, and
Okay.
discover the secret of gaining victory over abuse. I lived a life of abuse from the time I was an infant through till I was 11 years old. My parents divorced when I was 11 years old, and at that time, I was hoping I was going to get to live with my dad because the abuser was my mother, not my dad.
Was she your biological mother?
No, actually, this was the parents who adopted me.
You were adopted.
I was
okay,
an
as
adopted
infant.
child,
Okay.
yes. And when they divorced, I wound up having to live with my mother, which really surprised me, and how everything turned out. And she changed her total focus. She wasn't abusive anymore because now she's trying to get her a new husband, and she marries this man that she met in a bar, and she's become an alcoholic, and he's an alcoholic.
Wow.
And the war was on in our house. It was horrible to see the fights that they had. They threw mugs of hot coffee at each other right in their eyes, and they had blood dripping from their face and bruises everywhere. It was just horrible. And I had to stay up like till 2 o'clock in the morning just to make sure that they were asleep before I could go to sleep, to make sure they didn't kill each other or burn the house down with their cigarettes, because they would pass out drunk. And I still had to get up myself
11-year-old
up.
girl going through this kind of, wow.
And I got myself up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get myself to the junior high so that I could make straight A's, because that was my own thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to always have straight A's. So I was very, very responsible. I did, however, though, make a really terrible mistake. I stole $5 from my aunt once. And I went from living in the home of my parents' hell to moving into a girls' home. They put me in a girls' home for stealing the money, where bad girls live, girls who are runaways or had done a lot of criminal acts, and that's where I was placed. And in this girls' home, I was the youngest of 16 other girls. Wow. And of course, I got picked on quite a bit, but the one thing that I actually thought was a bonus was that where the older girls were, there were older guys. And so, I was 12 years old, 11 or 12, and I would have a 17 or 18-year-old boyfriend. And that made me feel really good, because really the only thing I was looking for in life at that point, my mother didn't love me, my dad was nowhere around. Here I'm in this girls' home where I'm treated horrible, and then I just needed somebody to love me, and so I was seeking it in a boy, and I needed an older boy. I needed someone that I could feel secure with. And so I was really excited to have a 17 or 18-year-old boyfriend, and they were right there all the time available. But of course, there's only one thing that a 17 or 18-year-old boy wants with a 11-year-old girl. And when I didn't give them what they wanted, they would break up with me. And that was just so tragic. I couldn't deal with it. It was like the last thing I could take, so I became suicidal. And this happened twice in a period of just a few weeks. And the caseworker got really concerned. And so they decided to place me in a foster home rather than a girls' home. So they put me in the foster home, where now I'm the oldest of 6 other kids. And this wasn't a good thing, because I was the convenient live-in babysitter. And the one thing you don't do is take an abused child that has never been allowed to cry, never been allowed to do anything wrong, and been beaten and screamed at all her life, and now I'm in charge of children. And they had an infant and toddlers and all that, and the mother would leave and go to the store or whatever, and she would ask me to stay with the children. And when that baby would start crying, I just would come unglued. And
you didn't know how to handle it, then, so did you?
I didn't.
It was never handled with you, right?
I was never allowed to cry my whole life. And it was just something very traumatic to hear a baby crying. And I tried to handle the crying the same way that it was dealt with me. I would scream at it, "Shut up!" And it wouldn't shut up. I didn't understand. What's wrong with you, child? Are you deaf or whatever? And so I shook it and I'd just throw it in its bed and I'd get out of the room because it just was a maddening cry to me. It just drove me insane. Wow. And I'm very, very thankful that I never hurt their children. I mean, I wouldn't hit it or anything like was done to me, but I just couldn't handle the screaming. And I was just trying to get their attention, but it just didn't work. I didn't know at the time that that's not the right way to deal with things. So anyway, after a while, I wanted out of that situation. It was just so bad. I finally called my mother and begged her, "Please, I'll never do anything wrong again. If you just please let me come home." Because living at home with them fighting was better than the circumstance I was in there. So she finally agreed to let me come back home. And the fighting was still going on. It was still that war. It was horrible. And while Christmas break had passed, I had had an opportunity to go and visit my dad for the Christmas break. I was gone with him about 10 days or 2 weeks. And during that time, he remarried. And he married this wonderful woman. She just was so delightful. I mean, she loved spending time with me, and she treated me like a daughter. And
you got to go live with him then?
Well, I called them and asked, "Hey, can I come live there?" And they accepted, and my mother allowed it, and that was like a miracle. I got to go and live now with my dad and my new stepmom, and they wanted me to call her mother. She likes me cooking with her and going shopping with her. It just seemed wonderful. But it wasn't but about 3 months after I had moved into this wonderful new situation where everything was, heaven on earth, that the bottom dropped out. And there was a situation where I was using the telephone calling my girlfriend next door, and she had an older son, and he was 18 years old, and he got on the phone, wanted to use it right then, and he wouldn't give me a second to hang up. So he starts punching the numbers on the phone and making this really loud squawking noise. And my stepmother was just right through the vinyl sliding door teaching piano lessons, and she heard this noise. She comes around the corner, and she's standing there with her hands on her hip. "What is that noise?" And I'm going, "It's Sidney. He's punching the buttons on the phone and he won't stop." And she marches off to her bedroom and comes back out with a belt in her hand. And I'm going, he's kind of old to be getting a spanking at his age. He was 18 years old, but she doesn't come after him. She comes after me.
Oh, my.
And she starts hitting me all over
I don't want to
with the
interrupt
belt.
you here, but we got to take a break. So hold that thought right there. Nobody's going to leave. We want to hear what happened after that. So we'll be right back to On to Others. Welcome back to On to Others. We're talking to Catherine Smit about her book, Tragedy to Triumph, her autobiography. Can you pick up where we left off in that segment? There was a bell coming, and you were going to get it. Now, what happened then?
I did get it. In fact, I was totally backed into the corner of the stairwell. She just went totally crazy, and she was hitting me all over my body, and I was just trying to dodge the belt from hitting my face and my head. And I was backed into the stairwell, just crouched in the corner as she just kept on and on. It seemed like it went on forever in her anger. And here there's a piano student right on the other side of the wall there.
Wow.
I can't believe she would just lose it like that. But that was just one of many settings. I mean, she's done things in front of my friends. I wound up going to my 8th grade Christian school graduation with a busted lip and bloody nose. From her hitting me with her fist right in the mouth for doing something I didn't even do. I mean, it was something she did, but she got so angry that she hit me in the mouth. That's usually how things would happen. But anyway, when I was 17, I just got so fed up with always these false accusations and how she just went wild and rampaged over everything that I finally left home, and I moved in with my boyfriend's family. They thought she was a crazy nut too, and so they were like, "Please, you can come live with us and get away from that crazy woman." So I left home at 17, broke my dad's heart, and he disowned me when I did that. So I moved in with them, and I wound up marrying this man that I had moved in with their family. And my dad had warned me, "Please don't marry him," because he could tell, he wasn't right. He knew he didn't treat me right, et cetera, et cetera. I kept telling my dad, oh, Dad, he'll love me. He'll change. Everything's going to be fine. Poor silly man. You know how
Right.
children always know better than their family, than their parents. And so I stayed married to him for 14 years and wound up in a life of even spousal abuse. At one point, I looked down the barrel of my own gun. And I finally had to get out of the marriage because of the abuse that I was going through. And his problem was alcoholism and drugs and things like that. And as a police officer, I thought the drug situation was over, but when that started coming back in, that was just the final thing. I could not live a life with someone who was doing stuff illegal and be a police officer.
All this led to you writing your book. Is that your
Yes.
autobiography?
I had people, when they would hear my story, my testimony, they'd go, oh, you need to write a book, or you need to write a movie about this. I mean, this is, they just could not believe.
Yeah.
I mean, because I have so many stories to tell. It's just unbelievable. Even the story of my adoption and how that all panned out. And they would just beg me, and I go, no, I'm not interested in writing a book. I just had I didn't have the knack for writing, no desire. And this one man came up to me and asked me, he was a Christian in the church, and he said, I would like to write your book then, if you would let me write your book. So I put everything on audio tape, but as God would have it, something turned out, and he was unable because of medication he was on for a back injury. He just said, I don't know what's happened. It's just gone. I can't do it. But you could do it. I know you could do it. I said, I don't want to do it. You don't understand. I'm not interested in this. And he said, will you please just pray about it? To appease him, I said, okay, I'll pray about it. And so I did. And the two things, I always believe in fleecing the Lord like Gideon did. So I said, God, number one, if you want me to write this book, you're going to have to give me the desire, because I don't feel like doing this. Yeah. But if this is something you want me to do, if it's beneficial, then I'll do it. And then the second thing, I said, God, also, you're going to have to give me the time, because I work full time. I have 5 children. This is impossible.
Say that again.
I have 5 children, yes.
5
and they were all living at home.
They're all living at home.
Little babies on the way up to
little gap between the last
teenagers.
time we left off of the belt and into this. Well, you
Yes,
got 5 kids now.
And I wound up, the Lord answered the prayer immediately that summer. Just a month or so after I prayed, I had been converted over into the school district policing, and I had the whole summer off.
Wow.
So I had a computer, and I thought, well, let me just try and let's see if I could do anything with this. So I got at the computer and started typing, and in 5.5 weeks, the whole story was done.
Wow.
It was amazing that God helped me to remember things that even when I go back and reread my book, I don't remember.
Well, now tell me, what is different about your book than other books on abuse? There's many of them out there, but yours is different. How's it different?
Well, mine's an autobiography only because a person who's a victim of abuse, the hard facts the advice that I give, they won't accept it if they don't believe that I've been where they've been. Because I've heard people say, well, you hadn't walked in the shoes I've had to walk in. And so I have to give them the whole story of abuse so that they can accept the advice that I'm about to give them. And the advice that I give is really hard, because I really hit hard on self-pity, and I hit hard on serving other people and putting your past in your past and things like that, and realizing that God has a plan for you, and that God, in spite of your circumstance, has a plan. And that's really hard for some people to accept.
I think one other thing that I've heard, that you mentioned in your book and so on, is helping other people, getting involved with helping someone else, how that helps you.
Well, that was actually, I would ask people when I was a young person, why does God keep allowing this to happen to me? Why doesn't he hear my prayer and deliver me from this? Yeah. And I kept thinking that maybe God was just tuning me out, or, I didn't understand, and no one had the answers. And I finally learned when I became a police officer and I was out serving other people and helping them, that my problems actually diminished, and the perspective was totally different. Yeah. It didn't seem like this huge mountain that I could never overcome anymore.
You weren't the only one that's ever gone through this kind of stuff.
And then I started realizing, I'm glad I didn't have to go through that and this situation, and how do you live through that? And all of a sudden the perspective was right. Yeah. And as I started helping others, then I started realizing the significance, the value that God had placed on me to put me there. This is such an amazing thing. God is using little me, someone who's totally been a goof up and a foul up, especially my juvenile delinquent days. It's also, those escapades are written in the book, how stupid I was. He's using someone like that who's totally destroyed my
Well, now,
past
is
life.
this the kind of approach that you use in working with young people, with students? I mean,
absolutely.
How do you do it? Okay.
Because then they're able to identify with someone who made mistakes. I was a runaway. I was a juvenile delinquent in so many ways. And when they hear my story, they're going, wow, you're a real person. You're not just this uniform standing there that looks like you got it all together. You know, I open up and I allow kids to see the human being inside, because if they just bond with me just a little, then maybe they'll open up, because these kids nowadays, they are hurting.
Yeah.
They have no hope. You just would not believe the circumstances they have to live in.
Well, one other thing that you mentioned in your book, we're going to have to take a break and maybe we can get started into it, but you talk how that victims, you know, can come out of the mess that they're in, you know, and I want you to talk some about that. We got just about 30 seconds, so if you start into it, and then we'll interrupt you maybe.
Well, one of the things that I first want to mention is what I just talked about, is helping others is one of the best ways to pull yourself out of that mental thought of being a victim. You have a different perspective on your circumstances that you've been in.
Certainly. They really don't look as gigantic when you see other people. All of us go through that.
That's
kind of
right.
the reality check kind of thing. Okay, hang in there. We're going to be right back to continue our discussion with Cathy Smit. Welcome back to Unto Others with Catherine Smit. Welcome again. I was glad to have you. And we were talking about how victims can turn it around, you know, so they can overcome their being a victim.
One of the lessons that I learned, I didn't realize that all my life I looked through the eyes of a victim. I saw everything in that mode, that mentality. Everything was skewed. And that means your hopes, your dreams, your thoughts, everything is just slanted, poor me. And I felt so sorry for myself that no one else needed to feel sorry for me.
Right.
And it pushed people away. People didn't want to be around me. And it wasn't until I started helping others in the police work that I really realized that I really wasn't such a victim. It really wasn't that bad. And then when I started reading the words of the Bible and seeing the stories of Job, and especially Joseph. Joseph lived for 13 years.
So unjustly.
Unjust. I mean, he was falsely accused, thrown in prison. Everything bad could have happened, but he chose in those circumstances to honor his God, the God that his father taught him about. And it was his choice. And that's where I had to realize it was my choice. And I soon realized that everybody has their cross to bear, that we are not given a life without suffering. We are actually told in the Bible that we will share in suffering. So when I realized that this is just my lot to bear, and everybody has a lot to bear, then it just seemed like there's some purpose. And then I saw the end of Joseph's life was there was a purpose. He was allowed to go through all that because it was his training ground for what God needed him to do, to be the governor.
You see how effective you are.
Right.
You're beginning to say this was a training ground, terrible training ground to have to go through perhaps.
But God held me through it.
He got you through it.
He held me through it.
You're still beautiful, you know, the Lord took care of that. And so here, you know, you're able to help so many people. Can you give us some examples, testimonies, we might say, of kids, young people that you have helped through your story?
One of the most tragic cases that I can remember is this girl that was at the junior high, and I had just started working at the school, and she was coming back to school totally bald-headed, and I thought maybe she had cancer, but there were big sores on her head. And found out that her stepdad had beat her with a cane and had made her strip naked in the bathtub, and he was going to kill her. He had told her, I'm going to kill you, and he put the gun to her. And I don't know for what reason, he changed his mind. And she was able to get dressed, and then he kicked her across the floor, and he hit her in the head with the cane some more. Her blood was on the carpet. He made her get down there and scrub it. Anyway, the long story short, he didn't wind up killing her. He wound up killing himself. But he scarred her so badly. She became suicidal, and she started cutting on herself. And that's the thing that a lot of young people do. They cut themselves, and they're saying that somehow it eases their pain, or it's some real strange thing that I don't even understand. But I saw that, and I knew God gave me the insight exactly what was wrong with her. She was seeking attention.
Wow.
Just like I did.
Yeah.
I would tell people my story because I needed attention. I was so desperate. And I was able to go to her and look her square in the eye and tell her that what you're doing is because of self-pity. You want attention, but it's not helping. People see what you're doing, but you're putting a Band-Aid on a gashed artery. What you need is stitches, sweetheart. What you need is God, and God is willing to help you.
Wow.
And she was willing at that point to listen. She cried, she poured her heart out, and I gave her hope. And I shared my testimony with her about just a little bit. I mean, I didn't go through near as tragic as stuff, but it gave her enough to know that I knew where she was coming from.
Yeah.
And I gave her that hope, and she did not wind up killing herself. In fact, a year later, she came back, her hair had all grown out, and she just had to come and give me a hug and say, "Oh, Officer Smit, you just saved me. Thank you so much."
Wow.
And I've had a young man who was sexually abused. And, you know, he was able to open up to me by me being in that classroom, in the DARE class, and giving just a little bit of my testimony. And he was able to come to me, and when he came to me, I knew some of the things that he thought in his head.
You know,
Because
you've
I
been
thought,
there. You've been there.
and you know, it's really horrible when you feel guilty and you feel shame because some of the things you've experienced you might even enjoyed, and then you feel guilt for that.
Yeah, right.
And they need to know that they're normal. That's the main thing these victims need to know. It's not their fault. It's the other person who was the adult that was the offender. It's their responsibility, and their response and their body responses are normal. And when they start finding out they're normal and they have some hope that they can overcome this, they look at another person who's overcome it and look at all the things I do, it gives them hope. And
you hear that often, that somehow they put it inside, say, somehow I caused this to happen, you know, it was my fault. You hear this so much on rape victims and so on, and that's so wonderful to hear you say that, you know, you can convince
that
it
was my
wasn't
deepest
their
thing that I went through. I was also sexually abused. I mean, I went from physical abuse from a mother and a stepmother, and I married into physical abuse. And then when I was 9 years old, I haven't brought up that I was sexually abused by an uncle.
Wow.
And one of the hard parts of that is I felt, because I listened to his trap, he had a way of, you know, sucking me in by talking about the birds and the bees. And I knew I wasn't supposed to be talking about this, but it was so interesting. I was so curious. Really, how does this all happen? And he sucked me in, and he made me feel like I asked for it.
Oh,
and I
my
carried that guilt around for years and years, feeling it was my fault for what had happened. And I'm able to help victims who also feel that way and who feel dirty, and they find out that they're not. I can give them some value back, and especially place the right value that God has on them for their life.
Boy, you can be such a great help, I'm sure, to these people. What kind of advice would you give to somebody that has gone through this kind of thing? Things you've been telling us already?
Yeah, the main thing is to realize that God never promised us a rose garden. He promised that we're going to have some suffering, but to know that God will carry us through and help us to be strong enough to make it through whatever lot in life He's given us.
And God is using you.
And God will
Catherine,
later use those things for His pleasure.
People want to know now.
The book can be purchased through the Texas ABC, and they're going to put the number on there.
Adventist Book Center, and the number will be on the on the screen there, right on the bottom of the screen.
Right, or they can call the phone number that's going to be on the screen.
Or your email will be on the screen.
That's right.
Any of those things. So.
And I do speaking engagements on this subject. I also do defense strategies for women. I teach them how to keep from being a victim of violence, and my drugs and gangs and different topics like that I speak on. And
so you actually physically teach them how that they can resist an attacker.
Yeah.
Some kind and so on.
There's certain little knacks, and women really need to hear that, because women are the main target of victimization, especially stranger attacks. Yeah. And I have just some little things that I can share with them, and I've been invited to women's conferences and things like that to share things, and I try to do it in a humorous way instead of a down way, which the subject matter's pretty much dreadful.
Well, I think by putting some humor in it, you can probably say some things that would be very difficult to say or to be received. Thanks, Catherine, for coming and being with us.
Thank you so much.
I really hope to have you back again, you know, on our show, and I know you're going to have many calls after this. Thank you for being with us. See you next time on The Undo Others.